All right. Okay, looks like we're live.
Hey. Do we have anyone viewing yet?
There looks like there's 8 people watching, so hello to the 8 of you.
Hi.
Right. So I guess let's just wait another minute or two.
Let me mute myself.
Hello there.
He's taking Leo on a walk.
So he doesn't look at us with his sad eyes again.
I already put his dinner out, so hopefully that won't happen again.
Well, I guess I could get started now, since my intro will take a few minutes as well, and no one wants to hear that. But yeah, I mean, thank you to everyone who is able to join us this evening. We're really excited to have Erin here, the guest curator for our current exhibition, Co-Terminous. My name is Emma Stoyer. I'm the executive director of Union Hall, which is a nonprofit arts exhibition space located in downtown Denver, right next to Union Station in the Coloradan. And we support diverse emerging artists through a variety of exhibitions, programming, multidisciplinary events, which normally take place in a really wonderful space. And we still have exhibitions and are open by reservation only, and are bringing some virtual programming to you all. So our current exhibition, Co-Terminous, is still on view through this Saturday, January 9th, 12 to 6 p.m. for the next few days. If you haven't seen it already, then please feel free to make a reservation on our website, which is www.unionhalldenver.org. And we are really thrilled to be able to work with Erin, who's with CU Boulder and the Nest Studio for the Arts, who curated the show, and excited to dive into it a little bit more deeply with Ariel Myers, who's our chief curator at Union Hall. So I'm going to hand it off to Ari now, and I'll be back for the Q&A portion. If you have any questions, thoughts, comments, please feel free to leave them in the comment section, the comment bar on our YouTube channel, and we'll get to those towards the end of the talk. So I will pass it off to Ari now and fade to the background.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Ari. I'm the chief curator at Union Hall, and I'd also like to kick it over to Erin to do a little intro before we jump in.
Sure. Hi, I'm Erin Espelie. I'm an assistant professor of cinema studies and moving image arts and critical media practices at the University of Colorado Boulder, where I'm also co-director of what Emma mentioned, NEST, which stands for Nature, Environment, Science, and Technology Studio for the Arts.
And we'll be talking a lot more about NEST as this proceeds. But just to get started, to give everyone who's here a little bit of an idea of what to expect, we're going to start out with a little bit of a curatorial tour. We do have a curatorial tour video that's available on our website and on Instagram. But for those of you who haven't seen that yet, we wanted to give Erin an opportunity to sort of set the stage, walk you through the exhibition with some visual aids. And then I have some questions for Erin so we can have a little bit of dialogue about her curatorial process, more about Nest, and about some other upcoming events that relate to Co-Terminous. And then we'll open it up for questions at the end. So to go ahead and get started, I will share my screen, Erin, so you can have some photos.
Yes, well, so I hope some of you maybe have seen the show, but again, as Ari mentioned, there are a couple of different ways to dive more deeply into it. But right now, we'll start with just a few images from the space to set the...
Emma, it looks like I actually cannot share my screen as a participant. Sorry to have you jump back on.
Oh, we'll just share that. We'll change the hosting setting. Make sure we can both share.
I can also share my screen if that's helpful.
Yeah, if you'd like to do that, I sent you the link to the photos.
Okay, and maybe make sure that I can share my screen later, so that because we were going to look at a couple of other things from websites.
Yeah, so I'll just do this for now.
Perfect. Thanks, Emma.
Amazing.
Awesome.
Okay, great. So here we are. We're looking at some images from the really beautiful architectural space of the building surrounding Union Hall. And this is a glass wall that abuts the gallery space or the exhibition space. And as you can see along there, what we did was we put images of a score, a musical score, which comes from Raven Chacon, one of the 8 artists in the exhibition, and his work, Journey of the Horizontal People. It's this incredible piece of music, which was also playing in the space, but is meant for a quartet. And we can talk more about this piece as we get a little bit later into this discussion. But yes, this is the way you would enter in the space, maybe coming from Union Station. I think I said Union Station before when I meant Union Hall. But coming through Union Station or coming from one of the many restaurants or shops, you would enter into the space here. And what I really wanted to have when you came up to face the space was to take advantage of this beautiful glass, which I was so intrigued that Ari and Emma had never kind of had vinyl or had made use of all of the glass that is in this exhibition space. And in fact, much of this had been usually covered with curtains. So instead, we removed all the curtains and just had this glass opening, in part because of the times that we're in with COVID, knowing that many people wouldn't be able to enter the space physically. We really wanted to think about outward-facing components to the exhibition. So all of these images that are on the glass are also from Raven Chacon's score, from Journey of the Horizontal People. And as you can see, they're kind of unusual, little poetic, circular bowing, stutter tremolo, decreasing in complexity, increasing, but also changing bow pressure. And again, this idea of shifting pressures and a kind of different poetic way of communicating with the musicians was really appealing to me. But the most appealing was this idea of realignment with these V shapes or this kind of downward pointing arrow. This reoccurs multiple times in the score for all 4 of the musicians simultaneously, and it's a way of coming back together. And for me, that was a really lovely way of interpreting where we are in this particular moment as well, thinking about realignment and who we look to. How do we find ways of realigning, recentering, coming back to a a space of common ground, a space of a shared sense of belonging on the planet, in a community. And I think we were all in need of that. So for me, this was a kind of heart component of the whole exhibit, was this realignment. So that's the way you would then enter into the space. And you would get a little information about Co-Terminous here on this entryway. But one of the first pieces you would see was on your left here by Alejandra Abad, who I encourage you to look up. Her artist talk, we spoke in depth with her a little bit earlier in the run of this exhibition. Biome versus borders, and you can see it's quite stunning in the shadow play that happens. And again, as you move through the space, it's quite dynamic in its in the way that it shifts and moves. And then you also saw there, kind of in the background, a piece by Camilla Friedman Gerlitz, which is that kind of orb-like structure, which is all made out of paper. It's weightless, but again, it's dramatically lit. Thank you to Ari and Emma for that, really creating a lovely kind of positive and negative space, so that the shadow itself starts to also take over. And then behind that, you can see the paintings or along the side there by Diane Burko. These are all relatively new paintings, some just in the last 6 months. And they're a series that she's been working on in terms of thinking about the poles, thinking about ice melting, sea level rising, but from a bit of a distance, and giving us a different vantage. But as you can see, they're just beautiful, gorgeous colors, so rich, really kind of compelling from a distance, but also up close. You see these glittering textures and really vibrant paints that are at play. And also some delicate sketching of actual mapping as well. And then on the floor there, you can see you have to actually navigate around the space. And these are pieces by a local artist, Amy Felder, who also was working with paper. I was so intrigued when I saw this work of hers because of the fact that these are not actual cairns or stacked rocks as they appear to be, but are in fact these constructions that she's painted and carefully crafted that allow her to really play with setting things off balance. These improbable geometries of rocks that this couldn't actually exist in nature, but that she has fabricated for us to give us a sense of the precarity of balance and the way in which the world is kind of all hanging at any moment could be toppled, but for our care and sensitivity of moving around a space. And so one of the things I was thinking about as I had these in here was just, again, how people would navigate and being aware of the ground beneath us. I think so often when we go into a space, we just disregard the floors. We're all thinking about what's on the walls or what's around us. And I think that's true in life too. Looking down often takes a little bit of practice or takes some mindfulness to do that. And I think it helps to draw our eyes there. And this wonderful corner we created for the works of Herbert Fostel. And these are very delicate paintings that are on a variety of surfaces. And as you might be able to discern, there are different depths to the canvases. And they all have, for me, a similarity in that they are a little bit, they're a kind of landscape, but that have become so abstracted that we lose a sense of kind of what's up and what's down almost. And yet there's just enough of a horizon line to give us a sense of where we are. So for me, this is a place of contemplation. Ari, I loved your comment that it's kind of Rothko Chapel-esque. We're in a space that it's darkened except for these kind of illuminated manuscript canvases that allow us to fall into them and enter a space for a little bit more meditation, which is one of the overall goals also of this whole exhibit, is how can we find places for thinking more deeply about some of the issues around us, and not always rely on a gimmick or a kind of information or the daily news to think a little bit more broadly, kind of through time and space. And so then we also have the work of Erica Osborne, who is in Fort Collins, a professor there at CSU. And we're seeing works of hers from two different series, but they're in kind of conversation. And you can see the back windows there are looking out on the train station. There actually is a train in the image there on track number 8. And again, we see the pages of Raven's pieces from the score on the windows. And if we're looking the other direction, you would also be able to see the back side of Erica's pieces. These are meant to be navigated fully, walked around, and the pieces in turn are meant to be in conversation. The ones on the floor are meant to be in conversation with the works on the wall of the trees, which are highly individual. I mean, these are very specific trees that Erica has drawn. And I don't know if we have any images, Emma, that you can go around just to show the other side. Okay, well, this is another piece of no, that's okay. This is another piece of Erica's on the wall, and it's in conversation with a video piece by Tanya Candiani, a Mexican-born and based artist who works in multiple mediums, in installation in various forms. And she was generous enough to let me choose one particular video of hers, which is shown in multiple contexts, both as part of larger installations, but also individually. And this piece of hers, called Walking the River, is a wonderful journey along different passageways of rivers in North America, and specifically a canal in Virginia that we get to traverse, but really interact with the plant species along that riverway in depth. So I hope this gives you some sense of the spatial arrangement. This little darkened area was set aside for, again, kind of closed contemplation of Tanya's piece, along with Erica's drawing, which I hope you can get a sense of the kind of twisted nature of that tree, which has been shaped by wind and various other forces. So, that gives you a sense of the space. And again, we return to Raven's pieces along this kind of triangular windowed area. Oh, you're on mute, Ari.
Sorry. I think one thing that's really powerful about the exhibition, the way that you designed it, is the way that you move through the space and what that experience feels like as you're going through. And I think your description gave a really good sense of the kind of common theme of motion and movement that comes through. And I have a couple questions about that. But first of all, I just wanted you to maybe jump in and talk a little bit more about Nest and how the collective works, how it came to be. Yeah.
Absolutely. So Nest is kind of a really wonderful confluence of misfits. It started out in part because I'm a scientist by training, and I found myself kind of surprised at the fact that when I arrived at CU, I was in the cinema studies department and a new department called critical media practices. And both departments really, if you looked at my CV, would be a bit of a surprise, given that I studied retroviruses and viral phages and had worked in a laboratory for several years. So to come in with this background in science and yet also having had training as a filmmaker and ultimately finding my way into academia this way, I was really searching for ways in which I could cross disciplines. And this was something that was being welcomed at CU at the time. There was a program in place called Grand Challenge, which was part of an Obama era call to universities to really think about, well, what's distinctive about your institution? What can you do to strengthen that? And one of the things that CU Boulder is known for is aerospace. And that's one aspect that the Grand Challenge funding at CU helped bolster. Another is a wonderful lab called Earth Lab. Again, very interdisciplinary, but highly science oriented. And what I was able to do with my colleague Tara Knight, who's also in the Department of Critical Media Practices, also I think would identify with me as being a misfit in the sense that she had worked with marine biologists, but was really trained as an animator, had studied Japanese animations and VR and in particular, a character named Miku. So in any case, she and I together both thought, we love working with scientists. And yet here we are being identified as being in the arts and as artists, but we also believe that there's real benefit to thinking about crossing over. So we proposed NEST, Nature, Environment, Science, and Technology Studio for the Arts. And we got that up and going really in 2017. And we were joined by our colleague, Jorge Pere-Gallego, who also has an unusual background in that he's an astrophysicist, PhD, but has an MFA in design and museum studies. So he's part of our team, as is Joanne Guillory, who has background in the Peace Corps. So all of us together have really been working to try and forge and foster relationships on campus and off campus with community members too, to think about, okay, what do the arts and sciences actually have in common? Why distinguish them? What can we think about as their shared commonalities? And of course, there are so many of those. The chief among them, I would say, is that we are all observers. I would say artists and scientists love to observe, love to look closely, love to ask questions, don't always know the answer to those questions. And that's part of the fun and curiosity of discovery. So what I've been most proud of in the last couple of years of starting this is the fact that we've been able to distribute a number of grants. So there are community grants, and I'm just going to share my screen for just a second to show you guys. Let's see, this website here. So if you guys can see that these are some of the exhibitions that NEST has had in the past at the CU Art Museum, at SEEK, at BMOCA we've helped support, in Boulder Public Library, at the Arbor Institute, now at Union Hall, of course. And we've got an upcoming exhibition that's going to be in Carbondale. But I wanted to just draw people's attention to the fact that we have these community grants that we give out regularly. My internet is a little slow, but we've got grants that we give out for community members that range from $500 to $2,500, and we've got also ones for graduate students. And I just want to point out that we've had a really unusual group of students that we've been able to support that span a lot of different departments. So for instance, I'm going to highlight Sarah Crump, who was in the Department of Geological Sciences as a PhD student, and Noted Ntasalan, who was a PhD student in English in the Center for Study of Origins. So it really crosses really wide disciplines. So I hope that gives you a little bit of a sense of NEST.
Yeah. One thing that I've always admired about NEST is that not only do you have these amazing artists and creatives and researchers that are part of your, internal sort of brain trust, but you also spread out into the community and do all kinds of different events, partnerships, fellowships, grants. So thanks for drawing our attention to the community grants.
Yeah, I hope people will apply.
Speaking of community grants, I also wanted for you to speak a little bit about the Deep Horizons project, which is sort of the larger project that Co-Terminous is linking into through the support of the Mellon Foundation. And just if you could share a little bit about Deep Horizons generally.
Yeah, thank you so much for asking about that. I'm really excited to be working with colleagues on this. I want to thank Brianne Cohen, who's in the Art and Art History Department, and Lori Peak, who's a professor of sociology and the director of Natural Hazard Center, and Andy Cowell, who's in the Department of Linguistics, and he's the director of the Center for Native and Indigenous Studies. So the four of us really have been working together. I wanted to call up a quote that we used when we conceived of this idea and applied for the funding for it. And it was a Franz Kafka quote. And it says, "We need books that affect us like a disaster, that grieve us deeply, like the death of someone we loved more than ourselves, like being banished into forests far from everyone, like a suicide. A book must be the axe for the frozen sea within us." So for me, this was kind of the basis of thinking about what we wanted to explore with Deep Horizons, which the full title is Deep Horizons: Making Visible an Unseen Spectrum of Ecological Casualties and Prospects. Thinking about environmental justice, inequities in the ways in which catastrophes and environmental crises are playing out. So it seems like I think it's a really critical investigation that's happening right now. And we're attempting to do that with a variety of events and ideas and people that we're bringing together, partly through this exhibit, through Co-Terminous, but also through speaker series, through a graduate seminar, and ultimately through a series of essays that might be collected into a book. But we're really trying to think about how to grapple with these ideas, which are not new, but are certainly rising to the surface and to the fore, and are in need of closer examination. And one of the tenets of this has been to really think about alternate ways of knowledge and moving outside of academia and away from kind of traditional, and this again goes back to my interest in NEST and how we can, at least working within the academic institution, question it and critique it and subvert it and think about what ways of knowing we can look to that are outside of traditional ways. So specifically thinking about Indigenous knowledge and histories and ways to bring that back into the conversation, or continue to have that be part of a conversation going forward.
Absolutely. Well, and one thing that I really loved about your exhibition, Co-Terminous, was the essay that you wrote for that, which I feel like could completely stand alone as a piece that just thinks about sort of the locality of downtown Denver and what sort of influences, both climate-wise and culture-wise, have had impacts on the space where Union Hall now is. Thinking about that essay, which I highly encourage everyone to read, it's on the Co-Terminous page on unionhalldenver.org. But in your essay, you use the South Platte River and the train tracks that run through Denver's urban core. They kind of recur like characters in this curatorial essay. And they also, in many ways, kind of reoccur in the works that you chose to curate into Co-Terminous. So could you talk a little bit about the landmarks and how they played a role in drawing parallels locally with the theme of the exhibition more generally?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I wrote the essay after having the exhibition finished and finalized. Just for people's reference, it was definitely, it came out of that. And I felt like I made a lot of discoveries as I was thinking about writing that. But one of the things I think you and I already talked about, just, when we were first talking about a collaboration between Union Hall and NEST, was thinking about specificity of place. What does environment, what does nature mean, especially in the setting of Denver? How do we draw attention to what's at play. For people in urban settings, I think it's often easier to forget about some of the, let's say, even very locally, thinking about the dangers of wildfires, or thinking about, oh, well, that's not going to come into Denver. That East Troublesome fire is going to, not breach the city limits. And, oh, I turn on my tap, I have water here. I don't have to think about the well water situation in Western Colorado and uranium contamination here because it's Denver and I'm protected en masse. And so that's those kinds of ways of erasing what's around us are easy to do, but also misleading. And so I wanted to think about, okay, well, what are some of the specifics of this particular place and locality? And I love the fact that there's a river going through Denver. I love rivers that go through all cities. I'm thinking of the Hudson River. I'm thinking of, oh, the river's going through Pittsburgh, or, the ways in which the Columbia shapes the cities of the Pacific Northwest. I'm very intrigued by the ways rivers function, and of course the ways they've been dammed and affected. So I gravitated towards thinking about the South Platte. And as I did that, I immediately started thinking about land acknowledgements as well, and wanting to pay real closely be very attentive to the idea of how things were named. And so that's when I talked to my colleagues at CU, Clint Carroll, and also to Andy Cowell at the Center for Native American and Indigenous Studies, to think about, okay, how did the South Platte, how was it named? What are some of the histories of that? And I was completely blown away by all of the different names that are associated with the South Platte, but that ultimately it comes back down to this idea that it's very slow moving. Platte means flat in French, and that was how almost all of the Native American languages were referring to it, was thinking about it as the tallow river.
I love that, the tallow river.
Slowly, yeah, animal fat.
Yeah.
I mean, it moves as slowly as animal fat. And so, yeah, the idea that here is this very slow moving river. And actually, I also was intrigued by the fact that it really actually flows north at that particular point, that it's closest to Union Hall. Mm-hmm. And yet that, in contrast to the speed of I-25 and I-70 and what's called the Mousetrap, which is just nearby in Globeville, and all of these trains coming and going, and the speed at which people are moving, and yet this history of the river, which is quite slow and more thougtle in some ways. Mm-hmm. So I'm completely getting caught up in my river there, but you get the idea. Like I was, and that tied in beautifully to Tanya Kandiani's piece, and her idea of the rivers as places to really consider the contrast between capital flow and the natural world. I mean, these are the arteries and the places where we see that in starkest contrast, so to speak.
And even within Denver, there's places where you can totally forget that the river is there, or it's even like this blight, because it's messy and dirty and, potentially contaminated further kind of down towards the north end of the city. Whereas right, near Denver in the sort of Riverfront Park area, it's beautiful and revitalized and has become this central place that residents of the urban core can come to be reminded how close they are to nature. And so I think that sort of, the river really does take on the shape it takes on the significance that we give it within our cities, but at the same time, it continues moving with or without us. And it has been there long before us and hopefully will be there long after. I appreciated the weight that you gave to sort of naming the river in the way that the Indigenous people whose land it is would call it, and also taking into account all of the different people who have shared that space over time.
Yeah, and just also thinking about how Union Hall is situated on this place of the origination of Denver as a city too. I just what a rare instance for an exhibition space to be in that situation, to be at a place where both native tribes had been coming for centuries to gather, to trade, and then seeing that evolution and that shift and the genocide that happened in the midst of that all being wrapped up in this particular place. um, that's a lot to again, something that I don't think people think about very often.
Yeah.
It certainly is a lot to pack into one exhibition, and there's no need or no non-possibility of doing that. But
Well, as you
I
mentioned, it's really easy to forget in an urban center, all of these, how water, how agriculture, how trade, like how all of those things have contributed to building the place that you reside. It's easy to tune that out and to draw attention back to how it really is this confluence in a lot of different respects. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
Another kind of question about borders and boundaries. In conceptualizing Co-Terminous, I know that a lot of the work that you selected had to do with borders and boundaries, which are things that are going to become increasingly more disputed as our climate situation continues to escalate. And how these borders and boundaries that are man-made are sort of liminal spaces in a way, because natural changes can affect them greatly. And I just wanted to know if you could speak a little bit about how this idea of borders and boundaries relates to climate change, which is sort of at the core of both Coterminous and Deep Horizons.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think imagining the world as it starts to shift, as we get more and more climate refugees moving in and out of different spaces, even thinking simply within the construct of the United States and ways in which, we're going to get people moving from Florida inland. Are we going to get more people moving out of the mountains with wildfires? Are we going to get people in the desert Southwest, needing water? Are we going to get people in the Southeast who are too hot? Everyone's going to be shifting.
Hurricanes, yeah, all of it.
Yeah, all of these different natural disasters, which the Natural Hazards Center is really thinking about, and my colleague Dr. Lori Peak is really considering carefully. But all of these are starting to already happen, but they are going to affect the ways in which we identify as being from a place or living in a particular place. And this idea of already being nomadic, or having some of that embedded in the way that we perceive the natural world. It's interesting. It's at odds with some of the writers that I've loved and followed, people like Annie Dillard or Wendell Berry, or even Rachel Carson, thinking about the specificity of the coast in the Northeast. The fact that the longer you're in a place, these authors would say, the better you know it, and therefore the better you can take care of it. The better steward you are, the more you know something. And so what does that mean if we are going to be in places that we don't know as well, or that are changing in ways so radical that we can't adapt or adjust or rely on what might have been true 50 years ago or a generation or two past? And so to me, it's a wake-up call and a reminder that, this idea of a national border, a state border, a city border, the difference between Globeville and Lodo, all of these divisions are so arbitrary. They're interesting historically. I love to follow them. It's kind of like etymological, excavation.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, let me think about the way that the word coterminous, came to take its shape, and the idea of endings, et cetera. But it really is arbitrary and not helpful for thinking about futures, and certainly is not equitable. And so thinking about how are we going to cope with these major changes, with a kind of upheaval of our identities as landowners or as residents, or having that kind of stability of land. Again, looking to Indigenous societies for some answers about, well, how do you cope when you've been forced to move to a completely different landscape? How do you get to know something? How do you contain your identity and rebuild it or maintain it in the face of something so life-changing? So again, this exhibition was kind of, and the larger Mellon seminar was really meant to think about these ideas. And I kept coming back to the fact that, personally, I find that one of the ways that I feel like I can cope is in the making of artwork. For me, that's films, but I also find it in looking at other people's work. And I find it not as much in the kind of activist oriented artwork that tells me what I need to do. I find it in the work that allows me to think deeply about what it means to be on this planet at this particular time, and that allows me to think about quality of light, or in the case of Erica Osborne's work, allows me to sink into a particular tree species and envision the identity and the individualism of a particular tree on a windswept hill. That kind of space is what I'm seeking when I'm overwhelmed with what feels like quite a daunting environmental future.
Especially with all of it being all of these data points that you can't even, our brains can't even process all of it. It's like once you get up to a certain number, our brains can't imagine, millions of individuals. It's like it's just a abstraction in a way. And I think the same, like the climate change fatigue thing is very real, because we can't fathom it. We can't wrap our minds around all of these little data points. This insect species is gone, or the temperatures in the summer are now this much higher. And it's just so much data. I totally agree with you that the subtleties in artwork can really help you, or subtleties anywhere, can really just help you to process a little bit better rather than trying to take in the immensity of it. Which actually leads really well to another question that I had about how you made your selections for the artists and artworks in this exhibition, which selfishly, I always really like to ask this of other curators, because everybody has a really different process. And I'm just really interested how you came to land on the selections that you made for Co-Terminous.
Well, I have to preface this by saying that I really am not a curator. I'm so grateful to Union Hall for letting me wear that hat. I have done it occasionally, but I do it somewhat reluctantly, but mostly with the idea that I very strongly believe in artists that Nest has supported. And I have looked for places to really be able to highlight that work and bring it outside of the institution of CU Boulder to larger communities. So I have to say that's been the reason that I've taken on this role, and it's not because I have the training to do it, but I approach it like an artist. I approach it like I would making one of my films, and that is to really do as much research as I can. I'm a research-based filmmaker. I would love to spend 95% of my time doing the research and 5% of my time doing the other work. So when I was thinking about this exhibition, I really wanted to feature Colorado artists, and in particular, I knew that I wanted to have at least one artist who was a graduate student at CU Boulder. And that featured artist who we had conversation with about a month ago, Alejandra Abad, was someone who had been a Nest fellow, who had studied sculpture with Marble Fellowship. And she was someone that I actually came to a little bit later in the process of curating, but I had known that I wanted to really make sure there were Colorado artists. So Erica Osborne was someone who I had known from her work on future forests in California, the work at her work at Sagehen, and elsewhere. And she's been doing exactly this kind of work for much of her career. So I was so excited to have her really be a cornerstone of the exhibition. And Diane Burko's paintings were ones that I had known of for several years. And so again, this was this kind of wonderful kind of opportunity to pull together people I really admired and had looked to in the past, and was able to kind of slowly piece together various people that I thought would kind of harmonize and work really well together.
I really appreciated the attention to the diversity of voices that you included in the exhibition as well. There's men, women, young, old, you know, every type of person really, as far as artists go. And I sense that with you, that is just your way of thinking, which really resonates with how we try to make exhibitions at Union Hall as well. And I especially appreciated you sort of framing the exhibition around Raven's work as the sort of sole Indigenous First Nations kind of voice within the exhibition, that his music became this unifying force to the rest of the work, and to center that with Indigenous voices, I think is really special and one of my favorite parts of Co-Terminous.
Thanks.
I just want to ask like one or two more questions, just based where we are on time. So one that I kind of wanted to dig into a little more is, throughout the run of show of Co-Terminous, but also through the Deep Horizons project more generally, Nest has been sponsoring some really amazing lectures with artists, authors, researchers, scholars, all kinds of folks, in conjunction with the Mellon Sawyer Seminar. And that included folks like Robin Wall-Kimmerer, who's the author of Braiding Sweetgrass, to our Alejandro Abad, who was in the Co-Terminous exhibition. So I just wanted to ask you, what have been some of the highlights of those conversations with folks from all over the world, all different ways of working, so that maybe some of our viewers and listeners can go check out some of these other supplementary conversations that are great.
Oh, yeah, thanks for asking that. Here, let me just share my screen for a second here on the Environmental Futures page. It's colorado.edu/project/environmental future. It's hard for me to pick out the highlights, but I'll just say this has been an unbelievable opportunity. Again, COVID has been one of these things that has offered you know, some unexpected positives. And one of those was that we were actually able to have conversations with more people than we would have if we had actually brought everybody to campus. So as you mentioned, I'm just showing here Robin Wall-Kimmerer. You can see her recorded lecture. It is on the website there. Same with Kyle White. Denise Ferreira da Silva was just incredible. We've had Craig Santos Perez, Susan Shupley, Julie C. And we've also had an artist, Nina Elder. She doesn't have a work on here right now, but she was a speaker as well, and did work that is still up at the Nest Studio for the Arts Space in the Case building on campus. And in the spring, we're having an equally exciting lineup. Edgar Heap of Birds, Macarena Gomez Barris, Catherine Yusoff, Jacqueline Patterson. And all of these, and Kim Tallbear, Julianne Warren, all of these people are going to be speaking in public formats, and everyone is invited to come and participate and ask questions at the end and hear them speak. But again, yes, I invite you to look at some of the past recordings. Again, all of these people that we've had as selected speakers are thinking so deeply and in original ways about how we can really think about alternate futures and making better decisions about climate and equity. Um, these are just it's hard for me to think of more important, in spite of everything that's happened today and possible coup. Really, to me, it comes down to what are we think, in the long term, what are the really broad consequences of living on this planet? And we've got to get beyond the petty and really
Absolutely.
what's happening.
And I'm really glad you mentioned that too, because I know probably folks who are joining us tonight are maybe in a state of shock, or I know I definitely am after the events of the day. So thank you all for being here. And I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I think one thing that is on the line here is just getting to the starting line of trying to make a better go of making an impact on climate issues than we have. And I'm really happy that we have an administration that is going to help push some of these things forward rather than continuing to suppress them. But that is going to continue to be a fight that we all are going to have to participate in on a local level all the way up to a national level. And yeah, when the pettiness subsides, hopefully we can start to make some progress. I just want to kind of wrap up my questions for you with, aside from the lectures, which we will definitely post a link when we post this talk to our website to where you can view all of these other amazing lectures. But aside from the speaking series, are there any other exciting upcoming projects for Nest, Deep Horizons, and yourself, if you want to share anything too, that you would like these wonderful folks to know about?
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I'm very excited about hopefully having a few other elements of the Mellon Sawyer seminar in the broader conversation and with the public. So I've been talking with the Boulder Arts Commission, and we're hopefully going to have some murals, some things that will be out in the world, in the natural world. Artworks in the spring. So please keep posted on the website. That'll be the best way to kind of find out where those will be popping up. And then for Nest, we're very excited again about the grants that we'll be giving. We've got a really exciting past cohort of fellows who are going to be continuing to present their work. We've got an exhibit at Carbondale that's coming up in April for anybody that might be wanting to venture out to Carbondale. I want to just plug the website and say if you can keep an eye on us there and on social media, we'll keep you guys posted. And then as for me, I am my most exciting current project is I'm working with Dr. Jeff Cameron in full Nest form on a film about cyanobacteria, working with his lab. So I have been working with Evan Johnson there to capture interesting images of mobile cyanobacteria.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Erin, for all of your hard work on Co-Terminous and for giving us some insight into your process and into kind of your vision for this exhibition. Emma has jumped back on and she is going to read us some questions from the Q&A chat. For those of you who are still here, still live, make sure to add any questions that you might have into that chat, and Emma will be pulling from there to give Erin a few more things to answer.
Hi, yeah, thank you so much for all of the information. I mean, I think that even being a part of Union Hall and being a part of Co-Terminous, it's still, every time I talk to you, Erin, I learn a little bit something additional about the thinking that went behind the curation of this show. So this is really great for me. And yeah, as Ari said, anybody in the audience, if you have any questions, please feel free to put those in the comment section on our YouTube channel. I'm just going to start off with a quick question that I have, kind of piggybacking on something that Ari had mentioned. So I know, she talked a little bit about the diversity of artists in our show, having 8 different artists that are so different with such different backgrounds. And one thing as well that I feel like I haven't seen as much in other shows is the diversity of medium and materials. And so would love to hear a little bit more about the thinking behind that. I know you said, going through research, you just kind of knew about a lot of these artists already, and it just, a lot of them just felt aligned with the show that you wanted to put together. But if there was a thinking behind that of really wanting to have the painting and sculpture and video and vinyl, I feel like there's so many different mediums there. So would just love to hear a little more about that.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly right. I mean, that is, I guess, kind of embedded in how I proceed with thinking about how I would want to experience things, and also thinking about the space at Union Hall, and wanting to really highlight and make use of what's there with the natural light that you have coming in from the train station, but also the little nooks that could be created. So yeah, again, as a filmmaker, I am always in awe of people who are able to work tactily and creatively with different mediums. So again, going back to the paintings of Diane's, I talk about this a little bit in my curatorial talk, but I also am intrigued with materiality, and the way that can have conversation with the subject matter too, and that the way that those can complement one another. That if you're thinking about paint and the history of paint and the material nature of pigment, and the way that also connects back to the earth, and then you're depicting earth with those pigments that have different properties of flowing versus congealing and accreting. That starts for me to really fire my synapses when I'm looking at paint that has elements of the earth in it that are mounded up and also liquid on the sides. That, as a representation of our planet, starts to get really exciting for me. So in addition to thinking about not just mediums, but also the way in which these artists were engaging with the materials that they were working with. So for instance, Herbert's work, he's working with very fine etching tools in addition to the paint, right? So the paint goes on, but then he's also scratching away at it. And so it's, again, for me, I start thinking about, oh, well, this for me is kind of like erosion. This is a scarring of the landscape. It's like glaciers tearing their way across a palette. And with the work of Camilla, thinking about the antithesis of that, and the lightness of paper, and kind of the almost the magical quality of this human-made material that can defy things, that can kind of defy gravity and create this otherworldly, almost celestial vision, but really only because of this distinct nature that is coming from trees. So for me, that is also a nice echo back also to the cairns, which is this also made of paper, but is looking towards stone, while Camilla's paper is looking towards light, and this opposite of what it's maybe attempting to represent. All of that reverberates with Erica's pieces that are very representative of trees and of what they are attempting to depict. Anyway, I'm kind of rambling here, but yes. So in addition to just diversity, both of medium of artists, but also thinking about some commonalities of the ways in which these artists are conceptualizing their material and working with it, and really also giving time and thought to what they're creating. This is kind of, the opposite of work that's made digitally and really kind of fastly, that that isn't thinking about necessarily what it's depicting. It's kind of more of a immediate documentation. This is the opposite of that. This is kind of like pressing pause on life and saying, I'm going to work for the next 3 months on this one canvas that's just this big. I'm going to delve into every little detail of this. And I think that's apparent then when you view it. And for me, it's I find it so refreshing. And I often send myself as a maker into the heads of the artists and think, oh, what was it like to have this much time with this one object? And it might feel futile. It might feel like the ephemerality of it can never be outweighed, by the observation of it. But for me, that's the point.
Yeah, I think that so many different people, and I mean, I've been sitting in the gallery space for most of this exhibition, so it's just been fascinating really seeing the reactions from different visitors in the space and talking about the materials. I think, I love talking about that a bit, and so many people don't realize that the Karns are made out of paper, and seeing that alignment between so many natural materials throughout the show and how paper can be used in such different ways that are both visually stunning. So I think that's really a great point that you touched on.
And I think it's so cool that Alejandra too ended up making her own paper for her installation. And that wasn't initially part of the concept, but it kind of came out the more she learned about the show too, and thinking about what she wanted to make, that became part of her process as well.
Yeah, no, I think it definitely looped in really well with all the other pieces. So I know also that you said that you, steer away from making things more having to be so actionable and in your face. And I love that this show is a lot more subtle in that sense, especially with something as huge as climate change and, environmental issues. I think it's so easy to go bigger instead of having a more subtle approach. But just wondering if there's anything, I know a lot of it is, listening and really understanding, but if you feel like there's anything that you really want visitors to take away from this show, from this exhibition, or if you just want it to be kind of up to the viewer.
Yeah, I definitely do want it to be up to the viewer, which is hard in a digital context. I mean, as I'm, talking about it in this space, it's particularly hard to kind of, I don't want to reduce the works to something that is, even speakable. I mean, that's the difficult thing about the experience of particular works is, and I struggle with this all the time in my own filmmaking. It's like, oh, I'm forced to write a description of it, and even the act of that feels like I'm doing some disservice to the work. But that said, I guess, I mean, I think I've maybe already iterated some of that tonight, and in some of the other contexts. But yeah, that one kind of, for me, kind of returning point is this idea that we need places for reflection. We need those places and times of realignment. And I'll just say this again is, the one of the things that Raven Chacon indicates is that ideally the quartet has at least one woman in it. And if there's more than one woman, it's the elder woman who is the one who controls when and how to realign the group. And for me, the exhibition comes back to that too, is this idea of who do we look to? Where do we look for ways in which we can do that and have those kinds of resets, or even just places to slow down and return to a shared tempo. And again, part of the point, I think, of that musical piece is that we know that we are separating all the time, and going in our different directions, and that's the beauty of music, of life, of the planet, and the diversity of everyone and every being on the planet. But when are the points what we can kind of come back together? So that, if I had to kind of pick something, that would be one thing that I would realign us and remember that importance of that realignment.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I know. I think I'm always so tempted to ask that, even though of artists and of curators, even though I know a lot of the time, it's hard to give a definitive answer.
Oh, we all are. No, it's like it's like returning to the Cliff Notes. It's like, oh, please tell me what I should be thinking. So often artists are asked that, and it's hard to resist saying what you feel about it, because of course, we each have that. But I am always in admiration of artists who recognize very fully that that's not the point. It actually doesn't matter, because they can tell you, any artist can tell you any number of ways that this is what you're supposed to feel, or this is what you're supposed to see. But the truth of it is we all see our own thing. We all experience our own version of it. And that's the point. And if we can't enjoy that or trust it, then maybe we're not actually having, enough of kind of an experience ourselves. We're just looking for an answer. And that's what actually so many propagandists and kind of activist artists rely on, is that people like to be told what to do and what to think. Mm-hmm. That's easy. That allows us to feel like we have some meaning ourselves in the world, and that we have a clear path forward. Mm-hmm. The truth is, of course, like, no, we don't. We have to understand that the muddied water and the inability to navigate is part of everybody's life. And to trust that and to be okay with that, I think takes a lot of practice. But yeah, we want to know. We want to know the answer.
Absolutely. I think it's part of the instant gratification of our culture as well. I have found that a lot in the past with other exhibitions that I've made throughout my career. Is like, it's easier actually to just slap a sticker on it that says, this is what it is. But it isn't necessarily going to provide the experience that you get from having to take time and think for yourself and generate those opinions yourself. And I think that is something that I really appreciated about your show, is that there is so much subtlety and complexity if you take the time to really look for it. And I think that that's something that hopefully will be the lasting impact of all of the ways that Co-Terminous lives digitally in the world, is that there's a lot to dive into and look into and enjoy if you have the time and you want to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I don't see any other questions right now in the chat. I don't know, Ari, if you thought of anything else while chatting, or if there's any other points that each of you would like to make.
Well, Co-Terminous is still up through January 9th. Is that correct? This Saturday. Mm-hmm. So we have a few more slots to view the exhibition. We're doing sort of timed entry. So if you are here and you have not seen the exhibition yet, there's still a few more days to make an appointment, and we will keep it very COVID safe and distant for you. So that's my only plug, is come see Co-Terminous before it's sadly down.
And I will also mention that if you're not able to see it before we close, or if you do want a little bit more information on each of the specific artists, I know we went through really briefly at the beginning of this, but we do have a full curatorial tour, which is up on our website and on our social media channels. So feel free to check that out as well.
Yeah, and I would just close too by saying thank you so much to the two of you, Ari and Emma, for making Union Hall possible. For those of you who may not have been to the space yet, I really encourage you to go whenever you feel comfortable and safe to do so, because it's a really unusual space to have right in the heart of Denver. this is a rarity. It's not a public funded, huge institution. This is allowing for a really kind of flexible, agile programming, which I'm so grateful to have benefited from. But thinking about how to show artists in the area, how to show new artists, emerging artists, semi-established, still growing, and then also, really, really cool established artists. So yeah, I just, it's one of these arts institutions. I don't even know if I can call it an institution. It's an entity that needs our support and enthusiasm and excitement to keep it alive, which again, it feels so exciting to walk into the space, see Union Station right next to Union Hall, have the wonderful energy of Denver and the vibrancy of the whole community around there that feeds it. So thanks to the two of you for programming and keeping it going and exciting and alive, especially in these hard times.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure working with you two over the past few months. And
absolutely. So
we are the lucky ones to be able to work with you and put together Co-Terminous in our space. So thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, you guys.
And thank you to all of you for being here.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yes, everybody have a great evening, and we hope to see you soon.
Bye.